on the new stuff. Sit down and have some conversations with them. It's not always about hearing their story. It's also about being news reporters for them and letting them know, like, yeah, this is what's happening right now. They may tell you something about what happened in Charleston that you couldn't even. Your spirituality has to create the same spiritual family. Okay, and that family exists first inside of you. You have to express the different expressions of that rainbow coalition of spirits inside of you first. Okay, don't let communities hijack that rainbow. Because the problem is when we come into the conscious community, the dudes are doing the same thing that the women are doing.
I just want to say that I really enjoy your show every Sunday, and my friend and I call it going to church. When we call in, we'll be like, you going to church? And I'm like, where have y'all been at?
God cannot go against its own truth. So anytime you have an inkling that God is going against its own truth, then God is no longer behaving as God, so therefore the spiritual community doesn't recognize God. You dig where I'm coming from? Or can we have a new thought? Can we step outside of the books for a second and have a new conversation about hair weaves and wigs? Can we have a new conversation about homosexuality? Can we have a new conversation about vegan eating? We do. It's a good day for exorcism.
Peace. Welcome, everyone, and good dawning to you all. Welcome, of course. You're listening to Chief Speaks on Enlightenment and Transformation, and I'm Chief Yuya, and I want to welcome all of you who are dialed in, calling in, and of course, those of you who are listening from Blog Talk Radio as well. Peace to everyone. And just wanted to catch you all up for those of you who are new or are kind of behind in the segments and whatnot and what we've been doing. This month we've been dealing with the concept or the idea of the equinox. And because, of course, on March 20th, we have our vernal or our spring equinox that we'll be dealing with. So in recognition of that, really going beyond just giving you some rituals and things like that, we've been kind of tapping into some of the energies that are present during that time and some of the things that we can do in preparation to not only become to utilize the energy of that auspicious time, but also to utilize ourselves in a way where we're actually working towards the things that we want in life and not working against ourselves. Now, always, like I share with you, whether it's the equinox or not, if you're going to do something, just do it. Don't wait for a certain season in life, like, oh, I have to wait for the equinox before I start to clean up my act, or before I start to try to find balance in my life, or I don't have any balance because the equinox hasn't come around yet. We're still in the winter solstice, so that's why I'm so depressed. Don't necessarily be a victim to it in that sense. All right. So you're learning to work with the energy and you're learning to utilize the energies for the purposes of your own growth and development. But ultimately, what you do is dependent upon your own will, or like we say, your ori, or your drive, or your heart, when you make the decision to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to get done. All right. So there's a couple little things I want to do before we start. First, let me start by giving out the phone number, which is 515-605-9862. Again, 515-605-9862. You just hit the number 1 if you want to speak. And of course, for those of you in the chat who will be coming into the chat, you can also speak from there as well. But couple of little things I wanted to share with you all. There's a sister, I think maybe a year, longer than that. As you all know, who've been listening, I'm bad with the dates, but it could have been last month. But I think it was about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. There was a sister, I was on her show. Some of you caught it, and some of you actually came over from that show, by the name of Nikki Love. If anybody's familiar with Nikki Love's show. But, well, long story short, we spoke yesterday, and she asked me to share some going ons that's been going on with her with you all. So I peace, Eladio, and if I said that wrong, please forgive me. But I said that I would share that. So essentially, some years back, now I can share it a little bit. When I do sessions and things for people, I'm very, you have to be hush hush. There's a privacy you have to maintain. But she had asked me some years ago about a reality TV show and wanting to do one and this and that. Long story short, but I said yes. You're gonna have a show. Just be patient. There was something on the table, and there was some little stuff going on there. It was not looking like it was gonna happen. I told her just hang in there. Be patient. It's gonna happen for you, and it did. So she actually has a show on the We network. We TV, I believe is the name of it. We TV. And the name of the show is Spirits of Atlanta. Okay, so she asked if I would share. I'm basically giving her a plug for the show. Okay, that's the name of the show, and the premise is, well, the original premise when she spoke to me, it was supposed to be about psychics, but this particular show was about, I guess, it's a relationship between two Christian pastors and two alternative spiritualists, her being one of them. All right. So the name of the segment, again, the name of the show is Spirits of Atlanta. Now, let me put this out there. Definitely, I'm all about supporting people and what they're doing, and just watching people fulfill what it is they say they want to fulfill. So I'm just going to kind of put it out there that I would see it as entertainment. All right. So I'm not co-signing any of the actual rituals or whatever they're doing on the show. I'm not co-signing the spiritual abilities of anyone, anything like that. So I just kind of want to put that out there. The sister asked if I would share the information because, they filmed the pilot. And apparently she told me that the pilot is doing well. It's got a good response, so they're going to film the second episode. Okay, now I actually watched the pilot yesterday after we spoke. And I guess I don't watch Basketball Wives and stuff like that, but I'm guessing it's kind of, it would be in that same vein, a lot of drama. Stuff like that. So I don't know. I guess for some of you probably would find it very entertaining. I'm guessing. All right. You could probably tell I'm not a big TV watcher, so so I'm probably not the best one to plug, and I'm not gonna be dishing the dirt on this one. What happened this strong? What happened? That's not really my style too much. But again, like I said, when I had first done that, that reading for her, she, I had told her she's going to have to exercise some patience, and she did. So I'm kind of sharing that aspect of it, that side of the story, with the addition to the plug, because, sometimes we're so quick we want things microwave, and we don't understand that there's a time and place for things, and sometimes people have to be stripped out of your circle for certain things to happen for you. Sometimes certain mentalities that you hold have to be stripped out of your circle. Sometimes people have to come into the circle. There's a whole formula and combination of things sometimes that needs to occur before certain things can pop off in your life. So like I said, with that particular situation, with that show and everything, I saw it. I said, it's coming, but it's gonna look real funny in a while, because they were talking about ripping up contracts and stuff. And I said, no, just hold tight. So it finally came, and it's like I said, it's on We TV. The name of the show is Spirits of Atlanta. I don't have the URL in front of me. Maybe I'll put it in the chat room a little bit later for anybody who wants to go check it out and and support. I'm just laughing because I watched it last night, and if you like drama TV, I think you'd like it. But there's definitely it's definitely April Mason is on it as well. Those of you familiar with April Mason, She's another YouTube speaker, as well as Bishop Tier. I can't remember her first name, and sister by the name of Hecka. But April Mason's a pretty popular YouTube speaker, and Nikki Love, of course, has a blog talk radio show and stuff like that. So a lot of strong personalities in one space. Yeah. All right. So I did my job. I did my plug. Spirits of Atlanta. Go check it out, and yeah, do your thing. But yeah, so again, kind of going back to what we were dealing with, and I want to also say peace to everyone who participated in the men's call. Peace, Miss Heyman, and peace, Brother Anwar, as well. I see you. Everyone who participated, I wasn't present, but I heard that it was very much needed and productive for those who were there, so that was good. I always speak about the dangers of that brotherhood deprivation, so I'm glad that you all were able to link up and get it in terms of the work, in terms of the work. But so again, we were building on the equinox, and all is strong. We were actually dealing with the maternal principle. If you haven't checked out any of those segments, I advise you to go do that. Check them out and just vibe on that for a little bit. Yeah, there was something I was going to give some energy to, but I'm deciding not to. I'm just going to let it wither out. There was something that, yeah, it's not even worth it's not even worth a honorable mention. But going back again to the idea of equinox, I had shared something with someone last night which they were unaware of, so some of you may get some value out of this as well. When you're dealing with the idea of the equinox, well, I know, in our last segment, Last Strong, what we touched upon was the darkness that occurs, that moment of darkness, or I spoke about the shadow self, that time where you're going through that darker time in your life where you're pulling power up from the surface, and that's the time prior to the spring equinox. When you're going through that winter solstice period, where again the night rules out over the day, in the sense that or darkness rules out overnight. You're going through a period where you're pulling power, resources, most importantly, wisdom. You're pulling wisdom from the dark places of your being to later be exhumed or to be revealed and manifested, during that summer solstice where light now overcomes the darkness. So what we spoke about was the idea of again, and the value of that dark period that sometimes we miss out on, we lose. And I coupled it as well. If you listen to Last Strong's community segments, you'll see that it actually complemented last Sunday's show, because I primarily spoke about the maternal principle, all strong. And when you're going through that dark period, that's the maternal period that you're going through. And there's certain things that you're supposed to gather and take on during that time. Okay, so again, there's always a time and season for all things that we do. And there's a certain time and season where certain energies are high and certain energies are low, right? And that's called the horoscope, or the horoscope, right? So now when we come into this space of the solstice, which we're approaching now, 8 days from now, we'll be looking in the face of that solstice. When you're coming into that space of the solstice, now you're coming into a space where you're dealing more with equability. You're dealing with things on a more equal plane now. Okay, so on that equal plane, there's something that's very, very important to keep in mind that sometimes we miss out on, because when you're dealing with Western culture, a lot of times the mindset is based around fighting. It's based around a lot of conflict. It's based around, even when you look at the ideas of patriarchy, which is extreme examples of patriarchy here, in comparison to feminism here, it's, we hate patriarchy, let's take it over so we can be the bosses and we can tell the men what to do. So it's always this either or. Either I'm going to be the oppressor or you're going to be the oppressor. You don't have that sense of equality, and when we speak about gender equality, we're speaking about gender sameness in this society. Equal means I get to do the same things that you get to do, or I should do the same things that you should do, which is harmful. That's dangerous. Okay, there's equality means that I get to flesh and full myself out in my own form character and in my own free-minded destiny, and you get to do the same thing. You see, and it doesn't mean that we necessarily have to do the same things, because there's values that I come to the planet with, and there's values that you come to the planet with, and we equalize one another by manifesting our own individual values into a collective and harmonious unit. So it doesn't have to be I'm the king of the hill. No, I'm the king of the hill, and we're fighting back and forth for position. So a lot of times when you're dealing with astrological events, or even astronomical events, there's this idea that one thing cancels out another thing. Well, this is high, so that's low, so we're just going to deal with that, and then we're going to run over here, deal with this. We're going to run over and deal with that, and the truth is that everything is always working in tandem with one another. Even if you look at a yin and yang symbol, and you have the white and you have the black, they're working together to create that rotation, to create that movement. It's not that black takes a day off and then white takes over, and then white takes a day off and then black takes over. There's a constant movement. There's a constant push and pull on each side. So even when it comes to ideas about the equinox, it's the same thing. So now, when we're looking for that balance across the planier, we're looking for that masculine, feminine balance, that light, that dark balance, that push, that pull balance, that fire, water balance, right? We're looking for the balancing in those spaces. Essentially, there has to be two energies at minimal present to maintain that balance, right? Oh, and let me give you all a number real quick, and I meant to say something about that before I go on. Again, 515-605-9862. And I know that you've been getting that dollar a minute garbage. What I found out from Blog Talk, which is still unacceptable, so I'm working on it, is that they're blaming it on T-Mobile and Metro PCS. So apparently, if you have a T-Mobile account or Metro PCS, which Metro PCS is a subsidiary of T-Mobile, they changed something recently in their calling plans that now are trying to charge people for those calls like that. So that's why you're getting that this call will be 1 cent per minute or $1 per minute per Blog Talk. However, that wasn't an issue before they changed my phone number. Okay, so that's just unacceptable, to even just try to toss it off on the phone company like, oh, you gotta go talk to them. So yeah, I'm not I'm just not happy with that. So just so you know, that's what's actually been going on. For those of you who have gotten that, if you have T-Mobile or Metro's PCS, then you may have gotten that alert. And what I would be very interested in, because I'm still dealing with these people, is if any of you do not have T-Mobile, Metro PCS, or a subsidiary of T-Mobile, and you've gotten that alert for the phone call, just let me know in the chat or whatever. While I'm talking to them, I'd like to see if they were correct in that or just talking out of their behinds. All right. So anyway, so like I was speaking about on the idea of that equality, right? When you're dealing with the equinox, what you're essentially dealing with, again, is that push and pull between male and female as well. So a lot of times, when we speak about it's an auspicious time to perform certain rites or to do certain things, look at it in the same way as the equinox. This is a time where you have the vibration of what we call the twin flames, which is higher than any other time. The ideas of mating are higher than any other times. Like we say, oh, it's springtime, love is in the air. Well, why is that? Because there's a balance between the masculine and feminine planes, or between the light and dark planes. Again, I'm using those same, I just give you the different synonyms so you can see when it manifests in different ways, So in a very simple sense. Like I was speaking to someone last night, they were going through something, and I said, it's probably time for you to get a man. It was a woman, needing some guidance and direction, and I shared, well, it now being the solstice coming up, I'm sorry, the equinox coming up, now is a good time, peace, Sister Ellis. Now it's a good time to really capitalize on that energy, if that's what you so desire. Now, some could look at it and say, well, I can balance the masculine and feminine inside of me. Yeah, you could do that too, but be wary of people who are always pulling you from indigenous wisdom. Like, I know someone like that. I'm thinking about them as I'm speaking. One time I remember I was around this person, I was talking to this young man, and he was going through some things, and I said, well, there's certain things that, it's not easy being a good man, and there's certain things that you're going to have to learn, and certain skills you're going to have to develop to be a man of quality. And this individual said, well, it's not just being a man of quality, it's being a person of quality. And this person is a feminist, and I had to tell her, like, be quiet. I'm talking right now. I'm talking to this young man. You're getting in the way. Quiet your mouth. And it was an older woman, so of course you're not used to people talking to him like that. But when you guiding children, for me, my thing is you got to be ruthless. When it comes to giving guidance and protection and love to children, because we live in a ruthless society that, in a very vicious and ruthless way, preys on them. So you can't be tender-footed about it. You can't kind of skirt around it, especially when you're realizing that sometimes things that people are saying are efforts and motives to keep that child trapped into that society. You see, so I've always been very hard on that. Like, I used to tell people, like, if I'm disciplining my child, don't get in the way. Because, and I'll just give you a real basic, simple thing I had to tell somebody. If I'm physically disciplining my child and you try to jump in between, you will also get physically disciplined. Once that hand is coming down, anybody who's in the way is going to get the hand of God. Okay? So I know that's a foreign concept for many, but again, be wary when you look at people who are constantly trying to pull you out of indigenous understanding. So I remember, for instance, speaking about the necessity of really establishing that mating, healthy mating practices. And that's why I'm bringing up this whole twin flame thing. And the person telling me, well, it's not really about mating. It's about learning to mate with yourself. You see, now that's some Western lunacy. It sounds cool. It sounds real pretty. It sounds real flowery. Like, yeah, let's, we got to learn to connect with ourselves. The man in me has to connect with the woman in me, and the woman has to connect with the man in me. And, that sounds great. It really does. But you don't build empires and civilizations that way. In fact, it's very selfish. Sometimes you have to step back for a moment and look at the larger picture when you're thinking about this. And like I said, even when it comes to consciousness, pay attention to why people showed up. Not just what they're talking about, but why are you here? What brought you into consciousness? What made you decide this is what I want to do? This is the information that I want to share. So even in that sense, when you start talking about mating and things like that, and you hear certain things, it starts to reveal the originating motives of certain people. And then you find out other information later. You find out things about them later. You see? So that's what I'm saying. Even with that idea of mating, it's important, because the truth is, if you don't have that, if you're not family conscious, you're not going to be group conscious. You're not going to be community conscious. And in fact, you're not even reflecting the value and the science of the cosmos. So most of the stuff that's being taught to you is going to go right over your head. You'll understand the knowledge of it, but again, it's the subtleties, it's the energy of it that won't be transferred to you, because there's no repository for it. It's very similar to when we're doing wealth rituals, and you work a 9 to 5 and that 9 to 5 has no prospects of anything else. You're not going to get a raise tomorrow and, double your salary or anything like that. So it becomes very difficult when you're doing wealth rituals because there's no repository. You see, so it's the same thing when you're doing certain protection and whatnot rituals. There's a certain energy flow that goes through the entire family that makes things happen. So if you do a wealth ritual and you have a family, there's an inspiration that's deposited. There's a spark of inspiration that's deposited through the male, through the Akashic energy, or through the vital energy around the family. And then that inspiration transfers itself to the woman. And then she produces something through the child in the form of understanding and wealth. So when you do the wealth ritual, it makes a 3-point stop off before it actually materializes in the physical world. When you're by yourself, you don't get all of that. You might get a little bit. You might do a wealth ritual, you get a little something, but you won't get what it could be, and it's not regenerative. Because once it's deposited and you have a family that's feeding into one another energetically, it keeps fueling that actual ritual. Whereas with you, by yourself, there's always a termination point. You see, there's always a termination point because of a lack of balance. The balance is the negative connecting to the positive, positive connecting to the negative. So it creates a circuit, and it's a continuous circuit. Without that, it stops. So for a lot of people who may feel like, he's always telling people to get a mate and do this, or even if you don't get married, get a lover or something, there's a spiritual reason behind it, aside from the fact that many of you are so addicted and allegiant to cultural insanity that you fight against that idea. You see? So now the equinox takes us to that twin flame idea. You see, the idea of equability between the polarities. You see, so that's essentially, it's the family modality in many senses. So just like when you're going through that dark period, through that winter solstice period, there's a predominance of feminine energy. So you learn to be receptive. Then when you're going through the majority, when you come into that solstice and you start to the days start to get longer, you're now coming into a predominance of masculine energy. So the family is all about creating now, creating things, and the things that have been produced in the dark are now coming to light. You see, so there's a continuous circuit and an interplay that occurs back and forth during that time. And I had spoke about this in a previous segment when you're dealing with the equinox, which I think is an important point. A lot of times, there are through the back and forth. I know it might feel like, well, what's the point in all this back and forth? First it's your turn, then it's my turn, it's my turn, it's your turn, and we just seem to kind of be going back and forth in circles. Well, the key is that through that friction, through the back and forth, essentially what you're doing is you're bringing certain toxins and energies to the surface. Now, I spoke to you about this before. When I gave you the reference, and it was in one of the community shows where I had just called in, so I don't have a date, but I know it was within the last maybe 3 strongs. I would say. Now if I'm wrong, I'm not good with the dates, but I'd say like in the last 3 strongs or so, I kind of spoke about that whole concept connected to the equinox. And the celebration or the acknowledgement of the equinox is nothing new. It's not a new age Wicca thing. It's not I'm breaking down the Bible, and the Bible is talking about the equinox when it's talking about the birth of Christ and resurrection and all. It was even way before that. You know what I mean? Again, when you're dealing with Osir, the Osirian tale, Osir resurrected on the equinox. When you're looking at the Nebhu or the Nebheru, which many call the Sphinx is aimed and faced that way so that when the sun shines light on the equinox, it shines it directly in the face of the Nebhu or of the Sphinx. Okay, because why? What does it represent? That Nebhu. It's a panther on the bottom and the face of a man on the top. So, or some people think it's a lion on the bottom, but feline. We'll make it easier, but exactly panther. But feline on the bottom, man on the top. I should also note to you that the name of that Christian savior was Yahshua ben Pantera. Ben Pantera meaning son of the tribe of the panther. Ben Pantera. Anyway, so we go back and then we see, okay, it shines directly, because what does it mean? Well, this is a time where I've mastered my animal nature. So this equability, the equability doesn't mean that the animal nature has equal footing or the same footing as my divine nature. That's not equality. It means that equability within my body structure means that my divine nature has conquered my lower nature, my base nature, my animal nature. So that was signified or celebrated during that solstice period. And of course, there's all kind of, like I said, you have the Asarian myth, but there's all kind of mythologies and stories that are associated with that time. You know, for those of you who are into the Hindi literature, Krishna has the same exact story. Dionysus, Quetzalcoatl, same exact stories again, where there's these deaths or these births or these resurrections, you know, these stories surrounding the solstice time. Okay, so you start to understand more the significance of it, but so it's a balancing act that starts to occur. Now, when you're looking in Hindi structure, right, real simple, and I spoke about this when I spoke about the foam. You know, they have this idea of a churning of the oceans, which is kind of like like I was speaking about a wire saw, or yeah, I think that's still the best definition. Or even like when you're making fire and you take two pieces of rope and you tie it around a piece of stick and you go back and forth, you pull it this way, that way, that way, this way, that way, this way, that way, and through the friction, you know, if you were to do that in water, it would start like a foam. You know, you'd have foam around. Now, that back and forth, or that push of pull, is the push and pull in the cycles that occur between light and darkness. When light in your life, darkness in your life, light in your life, darkness, and there's a confrontation that goes back and forth between each other. Now, again, like I said, it's a universal principle. You have it so many different places. You know, I did a seminar some time ago on the meaning of Easter, which is on YouTube somewhere. But and I broke down Astarte and the idea of the crucifixion of the sun, you know, through the vernal equinox, which later became the crucifixion, which was originally the crucifixion, and all of that. But because of the audience I was speaking to, I used a certain kind of language, which was even, you know, I mean, it was even kind of heavy there, considering the environment, the context I was in. But they received it very well, you know. But I mainly use that language when we're talking about Easter and crucifixion and stuff, because that was the environment. But it goes even further back than that. It goes further back than Astarte, you know, and that idea as well. You know, it goes further back than Quetzalcoatl, you see, or Tammuz or Dionysus, you know, and all these different energies. But that going back and forth, that friction that we're working during that time, it creates that foam, and that foam, or, you know, through that, that represents the poisons in our life. You see, so there's always a byproduct. Energy always has a byproduct. Emotions have a byproduct. Thoughts have a byproduct. You see, so the interplay that we have between life and death going back and forth creates poisons. Well, I shouldn't even say creates poisons. Let me correct my language there. It reveals poisons. Okay, so our actual struggle and our actual work, very similar to a relationship. When you have back and forth going between you and your man or you and your woman, your toxins tend to come to the surface. Your insecurities come to the surface. Your fears come to the surface. Your agenda comes to the surface. You know, everything that's in the darkness comes to light, because there's an engagement back and forth. You see, you're actually engaging the forces that are trying to keep you in a certain place. And for each side, each force is trying to keep them in a certain place, and it brings things to the surface. You see, if you're dealing with equal forces. Okay, if you're dealing with that's where the equability comes in. Now, sometimes someone could try to engage you and they get no reaction from you. You're just kind of indifferent to them. It's not really going to create any type of toxic churning in that sense. It's not going to challenge you in that sense. So you kind of will stay at the same place. The key is you want to expel the toxins from your system. You want to expel that. You want to expel the poisons from your system. So that's another, again, where we get into the equability of mating, where mating becomes important because it brings those things to the surface. Like I've said many times, there's only two people who can really bring you to your lowest depths, your mate or your children. That's it. Anyone outside of that, you could pretty much just like swat away, like get lost. You don't mean anything to me. Anybody. Even your parent, you could just swat away. It's your mate and your children that will have you homeless, have you living under a bridge somewhere, have you drinking, heavily, go to drugs, all kind of things. And it's because they are the science of that push and pull active in your life, of that positive and negative that bring things to the surface. You see? And they bring first your toxins to the surface. And the reason being is to prepare you for the toxins you're going to face out in the macrocosmic world environment. So whatever happens in your house first is going to happen outside of your house later. Use your home as an actual divination tool in that sense. Okay? So I was speaking about, again, in that particular segment, that whole science of the foaming that occurs with the ocean, and how it represents the cycle of the seasons, and how the push and pull, the dark and light will bring up the different values of our humanity. You see, and those errors that bring up different toxins, or bring up different qualities of our humanity, are called yugas. Okay, in our Hindi culture. Now, you know that we're in the Kali Yuga era, which is like the age of ignorance, the era of ignorance, the Kali Yuga, which is pretty obvious. I mean, we live in a society now where ignorance is celebrated. I was speaking about that with someone this morning. A friend of mine called me, and we were talking about, he had showed me, he had just expressed some frustration with something. And he was like, even in the music, like, it's just, everything is just horrible. And I was like, yeah, like, look how big trap music is. And he was like, yeah. I was like, no, but think about it. Trap music. Like, what is a trap? I mean, it's drug music. So we now have music for selling drugs. And we acknowledge that culture is a trap. And we now have created the theme songs around it. And all music uses those same drum patterns, the same chord patterns as trap music. So of course you're kind of inundated with it in many senses. So, he was kind of expressing that, and I said, but remember that the era that we in, these things have to happen, because these are the toxins and the poisons that are currently coming to the surface in our own humanity that we have to look at. Everyone's so upset and crazed at what the young people are doing, and look at how they're dressing, and look at how they're talking this, but they're only reflecting the toxins that you gave them. That's it. Because you're suppressing them, and they don't have the same filters of you as you do. Everyone, so like what he had reached out to me about, he was talking about the homosexual agenda, and he was like, I'm so tired of this, the way they try to force it on us, and this and that, and like that. And I agree, it is present, it is real, and I know people feel a certain way about that, but yeah, people always, like I said in the recent show, people are always offended by the truth, because if you are primarily a product of social programming is built around keeping you uninformed. So the moment you get some information, it's going to be an outrage to your programmed ego. You're going to be offended. You're going to be upset. Most of the time over something that got nothing to do with you. So yeah, it's a real thing. There is an agenda. Yeah, absolutely. And I had just shared with them, well, again, this is the era that you're in. So it reveals your failings as a man in terms of bossing up. That's all that's really about. If you haven't bossed up and your children now become victims of societal engineering and agenda, you really only have yourself to blame, because you didn't boss up. You didn't put your foot down. You didn't say, listen, man, this is how we doing this, period. I don't have to explain it to you. I don't have to negotiate with you. None of that. This is what we do, period. So a lot of men, males, I'll say, because I question your manhood if you can't do that, or if you refuse to do that. I really, and I'm not saying that to be mean or to be funny or anything like that, but I really honestly question your manhood when some of the basic principles and tenets of manhood are not alive and active in you. I don't think you're a man. You might be a male. You might have the biological formation, of a male, but I don't think you're a man. If you don't control your house, I know some of you are going to feel like, is he talking to me? Because I know some of your situations, but if you don't control your house, you have to really take a hard look in the mirror at your manhood, because again, controlling the house is controlling the life of the house. So if you're not controlling it, who is? Who is your family taking their orders from? So if you're not controlling the home and you're taking orders, then you're functioning in a receptive feminine place. So what are you in that space? So that's what I'm just saying. A lot of times the things that we complain about or we take great exception and issue with, a lot of times it's a result of our own lack of stepping up to the plate in the way that we were supposed to, as men, and definitely as females as well. So all of these different occurrences, and even the era that we're in, it gives us an opportunity to look at the poisons and the toxins that exist within the depths of our own psyche. You see, the movement of the sun, as it moves through it, it purifies things. So when you're going through that dark season and there's less sun, you're getting an opportunity to pull the power, to separate the power from the poison. You see, and then when the sun comes back around and it pushes everything up, it's going to push the power up, but it's going to push the poisons up too. You got to look at it all, and you got to be honest about it and not just sit on it and wait. Too many people sit on it. Well, I know I'm jealous. Yeah, I know I'm greedy. Yeah, I know I'm an angry person. You go down the list and, but hey, that's why I stay to myself. You can't push everything down, because it's that constant push and pull going on of light and dark constantly. That's going to bring things to the surface that if your character can't deal with them, because you haven't went through the character development, they're going to devour you. They're going to take you over. You see, because there's different ways that the cycles of life are illustrated that we need to pay attention to. And the reason that they're illustrated so much is because they're a critical universal principle to our own development. Okay. And the movement of light and darkness comes through the movement of struggle and opposition. You have to struggle in order to create. You have to struggle in order to produce. You have to struggle. And through that struggle, you see the role of each element in your own life. But through that struggle, each element takes its own position and takes up its post in the world. You see, so through the struggle and through the growth and through the duality of light and darkness, what we call evil and what we call good carves out its place in world consciousness. It needs to have its own place. Everything needs its place. Everything has its place. Everything needs its place. Even evil needs its own place. Good needs its own place. Wickedness needs its own place. So through that push and pull, what happens is that things come up that are unconscious. And a lot of times we're unconsciously bringing those things to the surface. And then they once we expel them, they then receive their place. Okay, because we're either pulling, or we're trying to embrace and bring the light to us, or we're either pulling and trying to embrace and bring the dark to us. You see, and that churning becomes vitally necessary. All right, I'm gonna take a break real quick, and then I'm gonna come back with some more on this. We're gonna get a little just slightly deeper.
So, severed from the traditions of our legacy, we now embrace alien philosophy, looking at our rituals with suspicion, disconnected from our divine foundation. We hope instead of know, wish as opposed to acknowledge, anticipate as opposed to create, worship instead of invoke, choking on the phlegm of oppression, suffocating from the ignorance of indigenous wisdom. Forgot our chants, rituals, and rhythms, forgot our initiation systems, forgot about the matriarchal order, forgot the sacred role of water. Connected to being nigga, what happened to our warriors? What happened to the healer, magicians, and drummers? What happened to our shaming, jollies, and dancers? We would prefer to be ass shakers and gangsters, giving props to Socratic methods while blatantly ignoring Imhotep. From step pyramid to urine stench projects, history ignored as identity neglect. Can't have self-respect without a healthy self-concept. Deep beyond the calcified, corroded psyche exists a true you. Sitting in the lotus position, meditating on liberation, raising your spirit vibration while disintegrating images of self-destruction. First eye to soul, revealing your purpose through visualization.
All right, and I'm back. Little quick break, pause for the cause, as they like to say. I'm gonna give you all the number real quick if you want to call it. 515-605-9862. 515-605-9862. If you want to speak, just hit the number 1. So we're speaking about, for those of you who are just kind of tuning in, building up and working towards this this solstice period that we have coming up on the 20th of March, of course, and we're speaking about some of the energy that comes forth when you're actually engaged in a struggle and in a work for your own development, which you're engaged in a struggle and is really for your own soul in actuality. But there's a foam that comes up, and we have this foam or this churning in so many different mythologies. You see this idea of it and in different forms. Even when you look at your Orisha archetypes, especially the water ones, there is a different element or a different path that connects to the foam aspect, and there's a different path that connects to maybe the deep water or the clear water aspect. It's different, when you're dealing with the shoreline paths, which are different, but even in our Hindi structure, we have what we call Kalakuta. Kalakuta represents that actual poison that comes up. But again, the poison becomes necessary because the heart that we have as people, some people, is pure. So our heart is born in pureness. It's the seat of our Ori, the Okan. And over life, over the journey, with interaction to the ego and whatnot like that, we take on certain heaviness. And those heaviness are really the poisons that we're talking about. So it takes that engagement and that struggle with the push and pull or the sanding. You think about when you sand something or you polish something, you usually go back and forth, whether it's on the vertical or on the horizontal. You're going back and forth. You're creating friction, and it's usually a dust that comes afterwards. Like if you sand a piece of wood, you're going to have wood dust. If you polish a piece of copper or brass, you're going to have a residue on whatever you use to polish it. That residue represents the poisons. Now, where are the poisons? Are they inside of the wood per se? Are they inside of the piece of brass or copper per se? No, they're on the outside. And as you polish, they come off, but there's a friction, there's a heat, there's an uncomfortability, really, in many senses. And there are parts to that piece of wood, let's say if you're sanding, where the wood may believe this is me, not realizing that that's the residue that's on top of your nice finish. But that's the residue that we're going to have to sand off through the churning or through the movement or through the friction. And that's actually the poisons. And the poisons are the outer covering that have translated themselves into that jealousy, the anger, the hatred, all the things that we spoke about earlier, being a greedy person, a malicious person, and insecurity, your insecurities. These are the poisons that are on the outer surface. So during that time of the equinox, where there's an equability between the light and dark, that churning or that sanding intensifies. You see, and poisons come to the surface in a more intense manner because you're basically sanding and scraping off the poisons that you've received during your time, during your dark time or during your light time, but when there was a struggle for one to get on top of the other. So when there's more dark, light wants to pull through. When there's more light, dark wants to pull through. So during that time of the equinox, it's almost like when you have all the dust there, and for a moment the universe blows the dust off, right? But when it blows it off the surface, you get to see like, wow, these are all of the harmful actions, the harmful causes, and the psychological responses that I've put towards people and I've put out into the world as a result of this ego that needed to be polished, or of this lamp, the lamp, you talk about the lamp of God, that needed to be polished and cleaned off. You see, and once I'm able to clean that off or polish that off, then the true self is able to rise up in between, because it no longer now has the weightiness of the poison. Poisons make you heavy. It's very similar to when you have a sofa in your home. Like after 10, 15 years, the sofa is heavier, especially if it's a cloth sofa, than when you first bought it. Well, what makes the sofa heavier, those of you who don't know about it, mattresses are the same way. You keep a mattress for 20 years or so, it's heavier than when you first bought it, because it's now filled with dust mites and dust and skin particles, and it takes on all these different really toxins from the environment, and you're just used to laying in it. Every time you flip the mattress, you feel like you're getting older. Like, man, this mattress is getting heavy. You think, man, I got to get in shape as me, without realizing these are not natural characteristics of the mattress. Those are old bugs and parasites and dust and skin cells that are now stuck inside of your mattress. You see, so it's very similar. Again, with us, we lose the value of our working consciousness because we have this covering that covers all of the positive results that we would receive through our struggle, because sometimes we're afraid to polish. Sometimes we're afraid of the friction of the churning. We tried to reverse the effects of what the equinox would give us. So like when I say, yeah, it's time for that mating, those twin souls, twin flames, and can come together and I'm gonna mate with myself. I'm gonna be by myself. Okay. You're just piling on. This is an opportunity to get the poison off of you. You don't want it off, huh? Okay. You're not really flowing where we're at, so you don't get that the right action that comes with that feeling of rightness and wellness, like I spoke about this strong. You don't get that sense of valuing of life, or the valuing of your consciousness, or just the exposition of your wisdom, the exposition of your divine knowledge, and the development of that strength that comes as a result of cleaning off the things that are slowly weakening you and slowly siphoning energy out of you that are parasitical. I'll give you a very small example. The thing that I wasn't going to mention earlier, I'm not really going to mention it, but someone made an attempt to come into my life. And, sometimes in this society, because of, again, the programming, people value themselves way higher than they should, way higher. And they don't understand that a lot of times the value that they're imposing upon themselves or trying to co-opt for themselves is really just parasitical power that they've leached off of someone else. And a person who generates their own power can see when we can see if your money's new or if your money's old. If you've earned that million or you inherited that million. It's a different kind of floss that comes with it. It's a different type of behavior that comes with it. So it's the same thing when you're dealing with Ashe, when you're dealing with Chi, when you're dealing with life force. When you're generating your own through your own struggle, and you're hardening and you're becoming more refined through your fires, because a fire hardens you, and someone comes along and wants to be a part of your world, and you can look at them and say, you're just a leech. You're a leech to everyone you meet. And of course you want to get with me because you're a leech, you're a parasite. A lot of times that parasite has no other response other than total outrage and offense. So what they'll do is try any way to seek to siphon power. They'll start by insulting you and slandering you, as if you're supposed to pay attention to that because now that gives them some energy. Well, give me this energy. I don't care if it's negative attention or positive attention. Just give it to me. You see, just give it to me. And the thing is, when you're going through your refinement periods of your solstices and of your equinoxes, you start to get a better sense of what represents a poison that's placed itself in the world and what represents that divine nectar of evolution and higher consciousness. You get to see the difference and the value of each one. So a poisonous parasite may try to come into your world, no matter how they may look or sound or what talents, it doesn't really even matter. You'll know that, listen, the only thing you're going to do is feed off of me. You have nothing to bring to the table. Like I use the term, I'll say like, you're not worth anything. I may not say that to the person. Depending on if they get slick at me, then I'll tell them the truth. You ain't worth nothing. You know, you don't bring anything to anyone other than an energy drain. You just bring your straw and your fork. You know, that's all you bring to the table. You know, so a lot of times we're not able to see clearly because we haven't removed the sludge, you know, of the poisons that are encased on us, and encased that ego sludge, the ego poison that's encased on us. So we start to feel even some form of affinity or endearment to poisons that are in the world. You see, so we see a poisonous person, you know, like we got that wild friend, you know, who's just sexually reckless, or who has no morality, who's heartless or cold, and we relate to him. Yeah, that's my homeboy, that's my homegirl. You know, I relate to him a certain way because the poisons in you are finding a home in the poisons in them, and ultimately they're both feeding off of your inner nectar. So eventually you're out of honey, you're out of nectar, you're out of ambrosia. And then what happens? They move on to the next thing. You see? So it's important a lot of times. And, you know, it's not to be, you know, offensive or, I mean, it's going to be offensive, but, you know, it's not to be haughty in that sense, to say, well, you know, we're just better than everybody else. There's some people I am better than them. And I'll tell them, you're not good enough. You're not good enough for me. Your family ain't good enough for me. I don't even like your children. I don't like anything about you. You know, now again, if you take me to that place, I have to say that, because sometimes what people will do, they'll get very insulting, because we're in a society where people have overvalued themselves so much through the mirage that's been put in front of them. And that's a part of the game. They've overvalued themselves so much that they couldn't possibly imagine rejection. You know, I remember being a young boy, because I was real picky when I was a kid, as far as like with girls. And, you know, a girl might say, oh, I like you. Or my friend like you. That's usually how I go. My friend Keisha like you. You know, boy, what's your name? My friend like you. She had liked it you from when she first seen it you. You know, and I'd be like, nah, I might look at I'm good. Nah. But what's your name? You know, I might do one of them things. And, you know, what's the first insult? Oh, what, you gay? You don't like girls? No, I don't like you. You're not good enough. You know, so a lot of times we live in a society where like we're just not used to rejection. You know, we're not used to understanding that sometimes there are different levels that we have to build up to. You know, and when we start to build up to those levels, because we see our poisons face to face, we feel like, I'm not building up. I'm lowering. But no, you're building up. Your toxins are supposed to come to the surface. It's like a detox. You know, and I'm sure some of you have gone through this. You go through a detox, and, you know, you look back at that toilet. You say, whoa, ooh. You see colors. Like, I never saw that color, and I was there. I thought I was empty. You know, you might have been detoxing for 3 days, and you're like, well, ain't nothing. I'm empty. And on the fourth, this is like, whoa, what the heck? That was all this time that was down in there, you see. And, you know, you might look at it and say, okay, well, this is what was in me. So now let me get rid of it. Now that I've seen it, let me go send it to the place that it needs to be so they can do what it needs to do. You know, and in some towns, that's the sewage treatment plant, so they can take that toilet water and reprocess it, put it back through your faucet. But peace, Brother Keith. But, so I'm just saying, it's important to go through these processes that we avoid a lot of times that are synonymous and connected with the solstice, because it allows us to really witness the poisons and the reflection and the psychological projections that we're sending out into the world that we're not aware of, because we've been so encased in the bubble of what we consider the nectar reflection is that we're sending out, and not realizing that the hard encasements around us are actually what people are encountering, and they're sending back a vibe based on the causes that outside is sending out to them. So it's an important season in that sense. Now we're going to get more into it. I didn't really get into the mythology of it as much. I took it easy on that. We're going to get a little bit more into that, but I wanted to just speak about the personal responsibility more so of the equinox and how it may differ from other equinox or other solstices, I should say. There's a personal responsibility that comes with the actual spring equinox, and that's really the acknowledgement of your demons. That's really what we're talking about. It's the acknowledgement of your demons, the acknowledgement of your dark spaces, and the spinning or the churning or the sanding or the friction that's supposed to occur during that time to allow you to push those toxins up to the surface. And by pushing again those toxins up to the surface, what you're basically doing is you're aligning yourself with the natural environment. That was, again, the science of the Nebu or the Sphinx during that time, is through that equanimity and through that process of overcoming the bestial nature with the divine nature. I align myself with this cosmic event. And then I move on to the next one. So things are happening in rotations and happening in cycles. And it's very important to see it as such, the rotations and cycles that are present. And these are some of the things that clear up the eyesight, so you could actually see what's going on. Because I tell you, for instance, when my friend called me earlier this morning and he spoke about the agenda, he said, yeah, did you see that? There was some interview about that movie Moonlight. And I said, I didn't see the movie Moonlight, and I'm not going to see the movie Moonlight. I know we're supposed to be celebrating because I guess it won the Oscar or something, or some awards or something. I could care less. I'm not. I know there's some homo thug in there. I'm good now. I don't want to see it. I can choose what I expose myself to, and some things, after I clear the toxins, I don't want them back on me. I don't have to go back to the hood and do certain hood things and to prove that I'm from that environment, or I can survive in that environment. Some things I don't want around me anymore. Some ratchetness I don't want in my life anymore. It's not cool after a certain age. So, and certain things that are shocking to my system, I don't want to shock myself with that again. I don't want to desensitize my spirit with that again by using layers of poison to wrap around me and desensitizing myself through anger and indifference. I don't desire that. So I don't want to see a movie with a homo thug in it. I'm not interested. I don't want to see a movie with a man dressed as a woman or anything like that, because the first time I ever saw those things, they frightened me. Literally frightened me. First time I was somewhere and a man tried to approach me intimately. It scared the daylights out of me. I was 16? It happened before that, but I didn't know it was happening. But I was with someone like hard body, came up to me, had a beard and everything. He was taller than me. Was like, yo, where you from? And it's like, well, what? And then licking his lips and stuff. That scared the mess out of me. I was traumatized behind that for months. And I was a young scrapper at that time. But it shook me. So I know the reaction certain things have. The first time I saw two men kiss, I threw up. Literally. I vomited. And again, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody or whatever, because I know some men, that's your thing. That's your thing. But for me, it doesn't pull me to where I need to be. It's too much of a shock to my system. Just like some people like really hot food. I don't need really hot food. It doesn't do me well. Now I'm not going to condemn you because you like to eat hot food or because you like to drink a lot or whatever. We all have our certain choice, but we got to know our lanes and know what's for us. And sometimes through corporate a corporate social engineering, we take on things that are not for us. Everything isn't for everyone. Everything is not for us to expose ourselves to, because it just takes you too far out of your movement, your good movement. Your good movement, not your deflective movement, but your good movement. It takes you too far away from your pure nectar. Your pure, and that's what we call the empirical or the divine elixir. Some people think the divine elixir is a combination of sperm and female seminal fluid, but it's not. The divine elixir is actually the elixir that's created through the churning of positive and negative energies inside of you. So again, during the equinox is a time where that divine elixir is even higher and stronger because of the push and pull. All right, that has been our Chief Speaks. I want to thank you all for listening in, and peace to you as well, Sister Marva, and everyone else who's on the chat. And I will be back tomorrow, dawning 7 a.m. for Dawning a Devotional, where we're going to get into some more stuff. We're going to, kind of do it like we did last strong, really cracking open a particular subject, and just going into it till it's drilled in and you got it till you can't get it no more. All right, so until such time, I will see you Monday 7 a.m. Eastern. That's tomorrow 7 a.m. Eastern for Dawning Devotional.